Hi everyone, and welcome to the CSS Properties to Get You Started playlist. This playlist will go through the CSS properties needed to get you started with CSS. This first video will serve as an introduction to CSS, so if you're completely new to CSS or want to get a quick refresher, you should watch this video. We will be covering how to link a CSS file to an HTML file, what are CSS selectors and properties, and what is CSS. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. So what is CSS? Well, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and it lets you describe how you want the plain HTML code, in other words your web page, to look. Here's the Google search page. We can all agree that it looks pretty good, but if we disable the CSS for this page, it will become just a bunch of text and pictures. See? We are left with boring markup. So CSS adds the beauty to the web page. Let's now look at how to link a CSS file to an HTML file. Here are the two files we will be working with in this video. The first is the HTML file. I have already created this file to save time. The other file is where we will be adding the CSS code to, which is currently empty. If the two files are not linked together, any changes in the CSS file will not do anything to the HTML file. To link the two files, you need to add a link tag in the head of the HTML file. Type link and then rel equals style sheet. This tells the HTML file what type of file is being linked. In this case, it is the style sheet. Then type href equals quotation marks. Now this is the path to the style sheet. Currently, my CSS file is in the same folder as my HTML file, so I can just type style.css. If, however, you have the style.css file inside another folder, for example, if we make a CSS folder and put the CSS file in this folder, you would have to type css/style.css. So now the two files are linked. So let's look at what selectors and properties are. Using CSS is quite simple. All you need to do is use a combination of CSS selectors and properties. To style an element, you will first need to select the element you wish to style. This can be done with a number of different selectors. This site has a full list of selector types. In this video, we will only look at the class, ID, element, and element selectors, but I will put a link in the description to this page. Once you have selected the element you want to style, you then need to pick the property of the element you want and add style to it, and then assign it a value. So for example, if you want to style the body element, you can use the selector body, and then open some curly brackets, and let's say you want the background color to be blue. All you need to do is type background color, which is the property, then colon, and then give it the color you want. If we save the file and refresh the web page, the body of the background color will become the blue color we just set it to. So there we go. White. Let's now change the font color of the divs to white. The div elements are nested inside the body element. So to select the div element, type body, space, div, and then open the curly brackets. This selector means select all the div elements inside the body element. Now add the color property, just like we did for the background color, and set it to white. If we save the file, you can see that the font color for div 1 and div 2 are now white. You might be asking, what if I want the div 1 font to be black and the div 2 font to be white? To do this, we will need to add a class or an ID to the div elements, and then we can use different selectors to select div 1 and div 2 individually. To add a class name to an element, just type inside the first tag of the element, class equals quotation marks, and then inside the quotations, you can assign this element the class name. This can be anything that you want. I'm going to use div 1. I will also do the same thing for div 2. Now that div 1 and div 2 have different classes, we will be able to use different selectors to select each element individually. In the CSS file, we can type body because they are nested inside the body element, and then a period. This indicates you are selecting a class. Then the class name. For me, it is div1. Now this reads, select all elements with the class name div1 inside the body element. We can delete this. I will also do the same for div2. Refresh the browser. There we go. Now div1 and div2 have different colors. There's another type of element identifier called an ID. If we go to the div1 and div2 elements in the HTML file, and we change the word class to an ID, we need to change the selectors in the CSS file from a period before the class name to a pound symbol before the ID name. There we go. Now that it's changed, we can refresh the page. And now div1 and div2 are now black and white. If we go back to the web page with the CSS selectors, we have covered the class, the ID, element, and element selectors. Now throughout this video series, we will be using these 4 selectors and looking at the properties we can use with these selectors to make our web page more appealing. That's it for this video. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you have any questions or any suggested properties that you would like me to cover in this series, please leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.